In America, everyone counts, and the 2020 census is how that great promise is kept. Respond today online, by phone, or by mail, and help inform hundreds of billions in funding for education, health programs, and more. Shape your future. Start at 2020census.gov. Conservatives are pushing hard for them to confirm a justice before the election. Others are saying wait during the lame duck session. Let's break it down. Kristen Clark, President, Executive Director, Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. Janice Mathis, she's Executive Director at National Council of Negro Women. Tricia Hofter, President, National Bar Association, and Barbara Arnwine is President and Founder of Transformative Justice Coalition. Kristen, I want to start with you, and that is when we look at this very issue, when we start trying to break this whole thing down. This is about to be a massive fight. Conservatives, they are looking to appoint a young justice. They want to have a 6-3 majority. Forget what they said in 2016. They have thrown those rules out. How do you see this?
We're on the brink of a constitutional crisis. We truly are. This is an unprecedented moment in our democracy. We actually have looked back at the history, to the founding days of our nation, and never, not once, has there been a confirmation hearing that has taken place as voters were casting their ballots. Election day is not November 3rd. The election has already started. Tens of thousands of people have already gone out and voted during early voting, have cast absentee ballots. And for many of those voters, this is the issue that is number one, that is top of mind. Who are the senators who will provide advice and consent on a nomination? Who is the president who should put forth that nomination? So in a way, we're talking about disenfranchising Americans if we were to proceed with this nomination in an active election moment. And I think that AOC is exactly right, that this is a moment where we have to rise up in ways that we've never done before. We need to make the Supreme Court a front and center issue for us as Black people. And right now, every church, every fraternity, every sorority, every Black business, every healthcare professional should be reaching out to their senator, regardless of whether or not they are Republican or Democrat, and tell them that this nomination should not go forward until this election is concluded, until the voters have spoken, until the people have spoken. This is a life or death issue, whether you're talking about abortion, whether you're talking about voting rights, criminal justice, people on death row. This literally is a life or death issue for Black people.
Barbara, we've been dealing with this issue on this show, talking about the judges, talking about the federal bench. Look, It barely came up during the Democratic National Convention. And I think one of the things, Democrats have not been as focused on the courts as Republicans have been. But if you look at the history of African Americans, when you look at dating back to the Civil Rights Movement, look, that was achieved through the courts, which is why conservatives created these think tanks, the Federalist Society, because they knew if you control the courts, you control the laws.
Absolutely. And, Mr. McConnell, during this first Trump administration, has been able to put on the court over almost 200 conservative, unqualified judges. And I want to say to, Kristen makes a wonderful point. We need everybody to be active, but let's be very clear. We don't want anyone nominated or confirmed until after the inauguration in January. After the inauguration in January, not after the election, after the inauguration, because what they're hoping to do is wait for a lame duck session of Congress. And during that lame duck session, they're going to try to, after the election, try to push through a confirmation. We want to make sure that Justice Ginsburg legacy is upheld, that the new justice has the ability to walk in her shoes and to represent the many interests and the theoretical universal framework of equality that she so wonderfully embraced.
This, though, is all about power. This is about power, Tricia. Republicans have made this perfectly clear. Mitch McConnell hasn't cared about anything except confirming federal judges. They want to be able to control the judiciary for the next 30 to 40 years. I have been saying for the longest, trying to explain to people, they've been very purposeful. That is, they want to appoint judges 35 to 45 years old who they know who are going to serve 40 to 45 or 50 years. That's the strategy. They're clear. They're not hiding it.
Absolutely, Roland. Please feel free to call me CK Roland, but absolutely. They have been saying this forever. And I'm a trial lawyer. I'm president of the National Bar, but I'm also a trial lawyer. And I have seen front center the difference in the courts because I have a national practice. And it's unbelievable, if you are a trial lawyer, the difference in the courts that you see now versus 4 years ago. This is deliberate, this is intentional, and it's by design. So we must go to the polls and speak truth to power. We must not allow this quick process of confirming someone. And that's why at the National Bar Association, we've got over 66,000 Black lawyers and African-American lawyers, jurists, judges, law students in this country. So we've already mobilized 10% of them. That would be over 6,000 of them to be in our nonpartisan election protection effort because we've got to protect the right to vote. Justice Ginsburg was all about the right to vote, protecting women's rights, protecting the rights of the least of these. So as African Americans, as women of color, we must stand and fight for her last word, because that's the right thing to do. We don't need to rush through this process. We need to go through the orderly process to vet the candidates, to have our candidates as well. The National Bar Association and other bar associations, we always have candidates that we propose, that we look at. And even if they're candidates that are proposed, we need to vet them as well, because after all, this is the highest judicial appointment of the land. And we will shape this country if we take it lightly. As everyone has all said, all of these issues are at stake, whether it's human rights, civil rights, labor rights, reproductive rights, the right to live freely in this country. So we can't take it lightly, and we must make sure that we call our senators' offices over and over and over again until we make the point of letting them know that we feel that this appointment must wait until after a new president is installed in January, after January, and not a minute before. And we should respect the wishes of our heroine, our hero, who has meant so much to this country, so much to this country.
Janice, I've had people tell me, look, I don't care about the top of the ticket. I want to focus on local issues. And I keep trying to explain to them. I said, Florida's a perfect example. Amendment 4, grassroots initiative, took 10 years. They get it on the ballot. Folks work their butts off to get it. They get it passed. Republican legislature then passes a law saying you got to pay all your fines and penalties before you get your right to vote. They sue the state. It goes to federal court. The 11th Circuit they vote in favor of the Florida Republican legislature. And I keep trying to explain to people, this is what I'm trying to tell y'all. You can have federal judges who are impacting local issues. And so you can't act as if who's the president has no bearing on the local issues, because the president picks the judges, the Senate confirms the judges, and so who is control of the Senate and the White House can determine what local laws are passed in your particular city, county, or state.
You're absolutely right, Roland. It's great to be in the company of these wonderful lawyers who I've looked up to, CK and Barbara, and I know Reverend Jesse Jackson well. And we've heard him say many times, you live but you live under the law. And there are no narrow Supreme Court decisions, and federal courts have awesome amount of power. But it's almost like we're trying to be distracted. The solution to whether we honor Ruth Bader Ginsburg or whether we retake the Senate, both those paths go through the ballot box. If you care about voting rights, if you care about the environment and doing something about these fires on the West Coast, if you care about the Affordable Care Act, if you care about the right to organize, all of those rights and privileges of citizenship get regulated to one degree or another. Even education get regulated to one degree or another by a federal judicial system because there are federal statutes to be interpreted and federal laws to be enforced. So I would just agree the path is through the ballot box. But I want to challenge listeners who may be from my part of the United States down in the South. You've got Lindsey Graham and you've got Mitch McConnell. And at some point you must ask yourself, why are we so poorly represented? These men have awesome power in the federal legislature, but yet our states consistently lag in education and healthcare and infant mortality and maternal health care. Why are we always at the bottom? Are they too much focused on keeping artificial majorities that they can't represent the people that they're elected to serve? It is a conundrum, and people need to vote their interests. We're not electing friends or family members. We're electing a government and a set of policy choices. And that's what we've got to keep foremost in our minds, to my point of view.
Kristen, the thing that jumps out, you talked about those issues, and again, a lot of folks who are on the left keep talking about Roe v. Wade. That is not the only issue we're talking about. The reality is the Supreme Court, as it stands, has had horrible rulings on voting rights. They went along with the voting purge, that lawsuit that came out of Ohio. They went along with to allow political gerrymandering that came out of Wisconsin. And they gutted the Voting Rights Act as well. Also, you put the Affordable Care Act is also in jeopardy as well because the Trump administration wants to throw that out. So we're talking about voting. We're talking about health. We're talking about a multitude of issues and also a Supreme Court. If you have a 6-3 conservative Supreme Court, they are very much pro-business. And so now you're talking about consumer rights as well.
There's not a single issue that impacts our lives as Black people that is not touched by the Supreme Court, that is not somehow shaped by the rulings issued by the Supreme Court, by the precedent set by that court. And, it's very remarkable. Over 200 judges installed by Trump in 3.5 years. Some of those nominees were unwilling to recognize Brown versus Board of Education as sacrosanct precedent that they would uphold. Some of those judges had clear records demonstrating hostility when it comes to civil rights and racial justice issues. We should expect more of the same if this president were to get an opportunity to fill that seat. We have to resist that with every ounce of our beings. I tell my 16-year-old son that if they succeed in filling this seat, they will be talking about that justice. He will be talking about that justice with his friends well into the time that he is 50 or 60 years old, because President Trump is being very intentional. The short list includes 3 women, one who's about 45 years old. We're talking about our life is literally on the line with this vacancy, and it's time that we rise up and urge these senators to do the right thing, the principled thing, and let the voters speak. Let the voters speak and determine how this vacancy gets filled.
CK, final comment from you. How are folks mobilized, or how should they be mobilizing? Should Democrats be looking at putting every single thing on the table? Yesterday, Speaker Nancy Pelosi would not comment on whether or not they would pursue a second impeachment. To me, this is not, hey, we're thinking about, no, this is called, you're at DEFCON 5.
Right. We should go for broke. Let me just break it down that way. We should go for broke. We need to act as though our lives depend on this, because in reality, our lives do depend on this. If we think things are funky now or bad now with COVID and the response to COVID and all the other pandemics that we're facing in this country, election suppression, police brutality, how do we think these police brutality cases, if they go up to the Supreme Court, are going to be resolved? If we think things are bad now, we should wait and see what it's going to be like if we don't go for broke. We have to act like we are on our last breath and we're breathing. We need more air to survive, because if we don't, we may very well not survive. A lot of young people think, oh yeah, we have the right to vote. No, you don't have the right to vote. The Voting Rights Act has been diluted. We have to protect the right to vote. We have to fight for the right to vote. And the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, is going to have a say-so on everything that impacts our lives, especially the lives of Black folk, especially the lives of Black and brown people. So it's a wake-up call. It's a clarion call. We don't have the right to ignore it. So on all levels, Roland, we've got to pull out all the punches. Everyone, lawyers, non-lawyers, some lawyers, it's not about your profession. It's about getting out and doing what's right, getting out and making sure your voice is heard and speaking truth to power. And the only way you can do that in this country is going to the polls.
Barbara
right now.
Barbara Anwar and I have been saying that scene from Remember the Titans when the coach said, Herman, leave no doubt. There has to be a blowout. This can't be close. The Trump folks are going to contest everything. This is where if you're 18 to 29 and you're sitting there with the lowest vote numbers, this is where, understand, I'm being real clear. If you're 18, I expand, if you're 18 to 35 years old, let's make this real plain. America is going to be a minority country in 23 years. That means that if you're 18 years old, okay, in 23 years, you're going to be 41 years old. If he appoints one of these Supreme Court justices, and if she serves the same number of years as Ruth Bader Ginsburg, that means that this appointee will be on this court until 2060.
And that is what we cannot have happen. If you're listening to this show and you're watching this show, the first thing you ought to be saying right now is not only am I going to vote, I'm going to make sure at least 10 other people I know vote. And we're going to vote judges. We're going to vote for judges. We're going to get rid of the senators who do not support good judges. Let's be very clear, everybody, that Trump can nominate, but it's the Senate that confirms. So what happens with the Senate in this election is the most critical of all of our votes. So people should be out there, South Carolina, Georgia, Kentucky. You got to really get your vote on for senator, because you have the power right now. Arizona, all of these states where there are, hotly contested races, Maine, you need to be voting. And I want to tell people that don't sit back and wait till the last minute to decide to vote. Vote early, right now, where you have that right. If you're going to do it by vote by mail, make sure you do it correctly. 6% of all Black ballots are being discarded in North Carolina because people need to follow those instructions. They need assistance. That's why we're going to have CK? We're going to have 3,000 to 5,000 Black lawyers out there helping with election protection, because we know that our vote is determinative. Remember that in April of this year, the most important decision that came down from this court was RNC versus DNC. And in that case, in April, even though she was very ill, Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote a searing dissent and said to the court, to the majority of the court, that you are denying people's voting rights. You're disenfranchising our voters, and that you've got to do better. So we need that voice. We need that fight, because if they take away our voting rights, it's going to be an impossible world to live in here in the United States. We have to vote, people. Vote with everything you got. Put it all on the line. Not only do you vote, you get others to vote, and you go out there and you help others to vote. Everything you do, the churches, the civic organizations, the Greeks, everybody. We need you in this fight right now.
This is, look, at the end of the day, look, Janice, we have some of these ads. Anybody who is trying to sit here and trust anything that a Republican said in 2016 is a waste of time. Mitch McConnell, if you talk about Chuck Grassley, in fact, this just in, Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley indicates he won't oppose holding Supreme Court replacement hearings this year. This is the same person who said before they said it shouldn't happen until after a new election. Same thing. Now, Alaska, Lisa Murkowski is on record as saying such. But now when you start breaking this thing down, it's real simple. If Mark Kelly is able to beat McSally in Arizona, then he'll be seated before November 30th. That means that takes the Republican majority from 53 to 52. If you go by what Murkowski and Susan Collins said, if they actually believe that the next person, the next president should pick that nominee, that now drops the Republicans from 52 to 50. That means Lamar Alexander, who's a lame duck, has already said he's going to go along with it. Now you have Grassley. That means that the one person left, the only person who could potentially stop this, Janice, is Mitt Romney. And so I know people want to put the focus on McConnell, but really, to me, the focus has to be on Collins, Murkowski, and Romney to not let this move forward.
Well, I know that it's not a good idea to disagree. I think you're absolutely right about where the focus should be. And the question is whether the voters in that state, his constituents, but I want to say this to those handful of senators who are facing difficult re-election battles, whether you intend to vote with the president or not. The president has demonstrated time and time and time again that he has no loyalty to anyone. Walk that plank with him on this issue of the Supreme Court, and you may lose your seat and the president won't even come to your aid or your rescue. I think that they have to bear in mind that all norms, all bets are off, all norms are destroyed. We are giving up on the idea of equal protection under the law in favor of some kind of oligarchies, giving up majority rule for minority rule. And so I would say to citizens everywhere, if you can vote, vote. Call your senators. Make sure they know that this is an important issue to you. To be honest with you, rich folk can get along without a Justice Department, but people of color, people who are marginalized, why do you think they're trying to suppress these votes? Disabling the post office, changing polling places, purging voters. That's because the vote has mattered. That is the last bastion for white supremacist ideology to hide behind, because they are no longer Black people, brown people, women, gays. We are the majority in this country. You're talking about the majority in 2040. Right now, that generation, if you're under 25, you're part of a cohort that is already majority Black and brown. They know that. It makes them anxious. And so that's why you see this total reckless disregard for the way the country is supposed to operate. But the people have a voice. Yes. And my co-panelists have already said that voice is to vote, not just you, but everybody in the House, the Lodge, the union. Everybody needs to express themselves. And I'm talking to low to moderate income white folk too. You cannot, if he will let 200,000 people die while he knew that the virus was lethal, do not overestimate how much he cares about you and your family.
Well, this is the thing here. If you want to understand why federal judges matter, just a few moments ago, a federal judge ruled that has ordered Louis DeJoy to treat all election-related mail as first class and restore overtime for U.S. Postal Service employees. I keep telling people, that's right. Why federal judges matter. So don't act like,
they have power.
So for all those people who I called out, and I'm going to be real clear, who were full of shit in 2016, who said Trump and Hillary were the same, yeah, this is an example of what I was talking about, okay? Because I said it then, the judges that Hillary Clinton would have appointed were not going to be the same judges Donald Trump would appoint. And so all these folks who were stuck on stupid, who got caught up in that whole deal, who were not understanding the long game, and this is the deal, the Republicans are about the long game. The demographic numbers are not lying. They know what is happening. They want to be able to control the courts for the next half century. They say we can lose the presidency, but if they install 300 federal judges, which represents a third of all federal judges, and they've got a 6-3 majority, and here's the deal, Clarence Thomas is 72, Alito is 70, Gorsuch is, Kavanaugh is 55, and Gorsuch is 53. Take the high end. Just use Ruth Bader Ginsburg as a model. That means if Clarence Thomas and Alito serve until they're 87, Stephen Breyer, who's a liberal, he's 82. If they served until 87, that means Clarence Thomas is there for another 13 years. That's 3 presidential elections. Alito was there for another 17 years. 4 presidential elections. That's why I keep telling people, stop playing games when it comes to voting. CK, Barbara, and Janice, I certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much. All right, folks, back to our Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment. As our community comes together to support the fight against racial injustice, I want to take a second to talk about one thing we can do to ensure our voices are heard. Not tomorrow, but now. Have your voices heard in terms of what kind of future we want by taking the 2020 census today at 2020census.gov? Now, folks, let me help you out. The census is a count of everyone living in the country. It happens once every 10 years. It is mandated by the U.S. Constitution. The thing that's important is that the census informs funding, billions of dollars, how they are spent in our communities every single year. I grew up in Clinton Park in Houston, Texas, and we wanted new parks and roads and a senior citizen center. Well, the census helps inform all of that and where funding goes. It also determines how many seats your state will get in the U.S. House of Representatives. Young black men and young children of color are historically undercounted, which means a potential loss of funding of services that helps our community. Folks, we have the power to change that. We have the power to help determine where hundreds of billions in federal funding go each year for the next 10 years. Funding that can impact our community, our neighborhoods, and our families and friends. Folks, responses are 100% confidential and can't be shared with your landlord, law enforcement, or any government agency. So please, take the 2020 census today. Shape your future. Start at 2020census.gov.